Your variable pricing and how you put things together in recipes and really managing that through your clinic, both from a promotional standpoint, but also just this really interesting idea that we have around inventory variations. So we're going to go into that quite a bit here in just a second. So I'm going to make sure that Victoria is here with us. Are you there, Victoria?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
I sure can hear you. We're on our new format
Perfect.
today, so it's an exciting time for us to try this out and see if we can hopefully get a little bit better picture quality if you guys are watching at home. So we're going to go ahead and get started. If you have questions or comments, just drop them in the comment bar at the bottom of the video there, and we'll get those answered as we go. So we're going to start here just talking a little bit about inventory. One of the things that our system is really well known for is how much we manage inventory. So we really do everything from soup to nuts, from your PO, ordering, restocking, par levels, transferring stock from one clinic to the other, all the traceability. It's actually a really robust inventory system, something that we're actually really proud of because it's a big headache for most clinic owners and a place they have a lot of problems with. So we focus a lot on that. And we have a new layer to add to that. So we're going to kind of jump into first, what is inventory? So if you're thinking, hello, that's a no-brainer, Tiphany, why are you asking that question? It is very confusing for many people as we go into variations. So Victoria and I both talk to customers every day, and it's a bit of a conundrum. So I want to make sure that we all align on the semantics of what we're talking about, just so we're in agreement here. So if we think about inventory, what is it? Think about it as the trade name of the product. So for instance, inventory, if it's Wrestlin' Kiss, is the name Wrestlin' Kiss, right? It's that one single box that you can hold in your hand physically that you can count on the shelf. You order it the way that you count it. So I order it by a box. With Wrestlin' Kiss, it's all very congruent in how I think about it. It's the actual physical thing, the SKU. What it's not, it is not an indication. So it's not, if it's Wrestlin' L, for instance, it's not tear troughs. It's Wrestlin' L. It's not a service name. It's not a difference in price. So the Wrestlin' Kiss box, Wrestlin' L box is the same price in your inventory, no matter what happens to it, the same cost to company. And it's also not an area. So I think about toxin. It's not, Botox glabella, Botox crow's feet. It's just the Botox name, right? I can't order it from Allergan as I want to order 10 of those Botox glabellas. I'm going to order 10 bottles of Botox. So there's a bit of a mind shift there. So we talk a lot about in the beginning of this conversation with all of our customers, agreeing to what inventory is will make your life a lot easier. So that being said, we're going to go into our variations. And Victoria, I know that you're there. If you have anything that you want to add or tag onto this, by all means, pipe up and let us know.
I sure will.
All right. And by the way, I have a new background today. Hope you guys like it. Okay, so we're going to go into inventory variations and what that actually means. And Victoria is the resident guru on these. She has been part of the testing of all these functions and features since we started all this. I'm going to give you a theoretical knowledge of what it is, and then she can give you a lot more minutia type detail that you really need for it to be successful. And then she's going to show us how to use it in the actual system. So we're going to kind of go through what it is, and then have her take us through how to use it, set it up, and kind of some comparisons to other things that we have in the system. But we talk about inventory variations as a recipe. So if you have multiple things that you pair together into a single service, that's a recipe. So we always use the example in our kind of internally about like an IV. You have multiple pieces, right? You have tubing, you have the actual, the Myers cocktail stuff that you're adding into a box or a bag of saline. So that's all kind of coming together into this thing we call an IV, but that IV is made up of various parts that all have their unique cost and all have traceability of their own. Another good example is like a vampire facelift. I have to trace both the PRP and account for that cost and the filler. And if I'm using any other procedure type related products like a cannula, or if I'm using Pronox, for instance, those are all things that together make up the one service called a vampire facial or vampire facelift. So a recipe is a collection of things that together make up a service that you want on the invoice that you're selling as a collective recipe. It's also a variable price per provider. So this is very common in our industry, as you guys all know. We see this every day. Back to the what is inventory discussion, we'll have people put in on our inventory uploader, Dr. Jones Botox and then Sarah's Botox, and then we'll have $14 and $12. Well, those aren't really inventory items. Those are price variations. And so an inventory variation accounts for pricing changes. I can have Victoria charge one price for a filler because she's a senior or an advanced injector, master injector. I'm a newbie, I charge a different price. but we're still using the exact same box of Restylane Kiss. So again, the box's inventory, our pricing variations are a whole different animal. It's also the item that you want to show on the receipt. So we call it an alias. So if I want to do, for instance, microneedling and my filler, and I want it to be called a vampire facelift, not microneedling and Restylane lift or whatever it is, I want to have an alias name. That's another way to do it. And then also medical supply tracking. So again, cannulas, it costs like, I don't know, $5 a pop these days. If you're using like a lifty aspirator, it has a little small cost associated with it. Your Pronox, your gauze, your, all these cool sculpting, all the things you have to put on the person to make it all work. Those medical supplies bear a true cost to the practice. And if you run out of them at the time you need them, you're kind of up a creek. So we want to be able to trace those in our system and also account for them to that procedure. And then lastly, touch-ups. If you're doing them for no cost, it's a set amount of product that you always give them. Like a liquid nose job, you might always have them come back in 2 weeks and get a certain amount. Then that certain amount would be part of a variation that maybe has no cost associated with it. But you want to be able to chart it as a touch-up so you know why it wasn't a revenue-producing procedure on that day. So hopefully that makes sense about the box of the product versus how you're going to sell it, talk about it, put it on the receipt, pair it together with other things. Like they're a bit of a different story for each one. Victoria, am I making sense or no?
It's perfect. And I can't wait until we get to the next visual because I think that'll even help kind of connect all the dots even further.
Well, this is my personal favorite. I like to refer to as the bucket of Botox. So as we've explained this to our technology team of how this works and to customers and to our own staff, I love to use this idea of the bucket of Botox. And so what the bucket of Botox means is no matter what you pull out of it or put into it, the unit count that you care about from an inventory perspective is Botox. So inside that bucket that you see, we have 1,000 units of Botox. So in my inventory list in AR, I have Botox Cosmetic and I have 1,000 units. Now on my variation screen, I might have Botox Glabella, Aqua Gold, I might have lips and lines, lip flip, staff treatment, high def tox, whatever I have, all these variations of different things, but I'm pulling them all from one bucket of Botox. So if I chart the high def toxin, if I chart masseter injections, if I chart lips and lines, no matter what I'm charting, it's going to pull those units from an inventory perspective on the back end from that bucket of Botox, because that's what I'm counting when I decide to order more from Allergan. I'm not counting lips and lines, I'm counting the Botox units. So we love to use this Botox bucket metaphor because I think it makes sense that the service names and different variations of things don't really matter for inventory. It's the product inside that variation that we care about counting. So did I do our Botox bucket justice? Maybe is she there? Have we lost our friend? Are you there?
I think my audio cut out there for a brief moment. What did you just say?
I said, do you think that I explained our bucket of Botox? What else do you have to add to that?
Well, I think it's actually really great. So I love this visual representation of the bucket of Botox because I know too from all of our clients that we work with, when we have worked with them on configuring inventory variations, it's a really, really great visual representation of what that actually is. So I think too, if we think about microneedling tips, hydrofacial tips, really anything where you could be calling that product or that service something different. As long as we think back to that bucket of where our product is actually stored, I think that it kind of helps us, connect the dots along the way. So
I totally agree.
I like it.
Me too. Well, we're going to move into some specific types of variations and how we take our bucket of Botox idea and really translate that into inventory variations. And then from there, we'll kind of march down the path and go into how to actually build them. So we've got some specific types here that we like to talk about. And Victoria built some of these earlier today, so she can fill us in too, but I'll give you a couple of high levels. And this is a real scenario across every customer that we ever deal with, I think. It's very common, where you charge a different price for units based on who's injecting it. I never thought it was that common as a sales rep, but now on this side of the business, we see it so often where they may have a junior level injector who's new charging $10 a unit, and their senior or master providers charging $15 a unit. That's obviously a very common thing. I think the other part is if you have member pricing, so in our system we have membership pricing, which obviously gives them a discount. If you want to discount it even further and have a specific type called membership Botox that you give some special always everyday deal to, that's another great way to do this. So that's certainly an option as well. Or if you're just doing it by different types of indications. And so I always think about immediately in my mind tear troughs and liquid rhinoplasties, because those bear such incredible risk compared to maybe a lip procedure. They all bear risk, don't get me wrong, but because they are a more advanced injection that we obviously know keeps you up at night, many of us, they may cost more to the patient. And so if I put in my cart just a Restylane lift, for instance, it doesn't really talk about the whole liquid nose job. So they may wonder why the pricing is different, what's going on. I want to just charge for liquid nose job. So the indication might make the pricing vary significantly based on how you're using it. And the patient should only have to see what the actual thing is called, not the particular inputs of the product. So the pricing variation, I think, is a big one for us that we, as a use case, as an industry, we do every single day. Anything you want to add there, Victoria?
I was just going to mention too, we have a lot of training schools that actually, are using aesthetic record to get, their students ready to go live in the real world. And so I think this is also another really great example of if we do have someone that is potentially in training, that pricing is different. So whether you have models coming in and, they're practicing on those models, that's another great tool and great way to set up your pricing so that it's customized.
I didn't even think about that example. That is a perfect example. We have, I know that Yvonne Delos out in Utah uses our system for all of her trainings, and I'm sure that her models pay a different price than they would pay in her regular clinic. So maybe a great example of how that would work too. So good catch, sister. Okay, so we'll go on to recipes, because we'll show you how that other part works in the system. But on the recipes, again, these are things that are combinations. We were talking about earlier, Victoria and I, about like the Genius microneedling. We'll go through that actual combination in the system, but these are things that work together to create an overall procedure. And so there's ways to do it, really two thoughts. It might be where one particular item is the service, like the actual medical service, and everything else in that recipe is either a retail add-on, like a hydrofacial with a serum add-on, or it's the medical supplies that you're adding into it that you want to account for, especially with IVs, because the IV bags and tubing are critically important. But it might also be just pairing things together from a product, like actual procedure component as well. So there are many providers who charge by the service, and the service might be a combination of many things. So I think about Shino Aguilera. If you ever look at his menu of services, he does this exact thing where, I don't know what he actually calls it, but let's say it's a perfect pout. And that's a combination of possibly a few filler, maybe some toxin, it could be, all these other things, but the package together is called the perfect pout, for instance. And inside of that package is a recipe of multiple different pieces of products that don't need to be line itemed out on the invoice. They're just paying for the perfect pout. They're not paying for all the various pieces. So that's a great example of if you're using that pricing model, you want the invoice to say this procedure that you're selling, which is the perfect pout, not the various inputs. So we're going to go through this one pretty specifically inside of the system and let you see how you can add in services, retail products, and your medical supplies. Anything you want to add on that one?
Yeah, I think that hits everything, from that regard. So very good.
Well, we aim to please around here. We're going to show you a bit of a comparison here. So one of the things that really is everywhere right now, threads and liquid nose jobs are all over the Instagram. If you guys are Instagram followers, I'm sure you are, that's all you see right now are threads and liquid nose jobs, which are both very amazing, interesting, and compelling. But the point being, you probably charge more for liquid nose job than you do for your Restylane lift syringe. So it's a great example of the naming convention. So I mentioned at the very beginning, the alias, or the name of the product or the name of the service has a big impact on how your business runs, because if you don't have the name match the service and a patient walks away with, well, my Botox is now $6 a unit. No, it wasn't. It was part of this recipe. You don't want them to see the individual components that you're putting into it that might be discounted to make the overall price work. You want to just see the overall price and the name. So in liquid nose job, as opposed to putting in just the Restylane lift syringe at some price, you'd want to put in the whole thing together and call it liquid nose job with a new pricing variation. But again, pulling from the bucket of Restylane lift. And then also consumables. So if we're using like a tip for microneedling, I don't want them to necessarily see that or see my IV tubing or my IV bag. I want them to see the Myers cocktail is what they're seeing on their invoice. And so we have a bit of a picture of this that you can kind of get your mind around. On the left, you see this regular inventory report or regular inventory receipt. So let's say it's a nose job. If I go to inject the nose with my Restylane lift syringe, that's always $800 every day of the week, Monday through Sunday, $800 always. That shows up on the receipt as lift, $800. To get to that price point that I feel comfortable charging, I've got to add in some additional fee to plus that up. So I'm adding in an injector fee to make it equal with the $1,100 I want to charge for it. So on the patient's receipt, they're seeing the lift syringe that they always get, right, $800, and then this fee. How come I don't get that fee charged on other procedures? How come this one has the fee and not the other one doesn't have the fee? Then you start having all these questions coming about. As opposed to that, go to the other side, here on the right side, I'm just going to charge for a non-surgical nose job at $1,100. It's a quick chart it that way, put it in the cart, and pay it out. And there's no need to change, layer, anything. And the patient never sees what the inputs are. They don't know it's part of a product cost and an injector fee. It won't confuse them at pricing or at checkout at the front desk either. It's like, oh, liquid nose job. Not, we got rest and lift, I wonder what this injector fee is for. Because they won't know what the procedure is if you do a front desk checkout. So there are just some ways there that I think are helpful for the practice efficiency-wise, but also for the patient to see what you want them to see.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think there too, you and I kind of briefly talked about it earlier, but when we think about even different marketing campaigns, so let's say that you recently launched a new campaign and maybe you're really trying to push, liquid rhinoplasty, for example. So I think too, when you use those buzzwords on social media, it's really nice that you can button it up and marry that type of verbiage to the invoice that your patient is actually seeing in office. So I think it's important too, when you look at, certain things that you're running and actually being able to track that back, to business insights, it's very important. So.
Totally agree. And you hit the magic word there, business insights. We're going to show you guys how the reporting works on this on the back end so that your inventory stays accurate, but you can also track the individual things and how you're selling them and kind of what the costs are for those. So we're going to confuse you to death right now by comparing this to a promotion. Hopefully not confusing. We're hopefully going to dispel the myths. On the promotion side, we've had promotions in our system for a long time, which we've always, in a sense, kind of used like a variation because we didn't have this function or feature. So we're going to kind of, I think, walk you through where the great divide lies between a promotion and a variation, because it might be confusing to you as you hear these things right now. So we're going to give you a couple of high-level examples here. So if a variation is how I change an everyday thing to be the name I want it, the price I want it, the recipe I want it, what's a promo? So a promo is when you sell a series of things. So you're packaging things together. So if it's a package of 3 microneedling treatments, that's a package deal that has a certain cost to it. That's going to be a promotion. So your packages are always going to be in the promotions patient loyalty tab in our system. When you have a discount, if I want to just do like a short-term discount for the gym members down the street for 1 month, I want to apply a 10% discount to all the invoices. I'm going to have a discount with that thing on it. I'm not going to have a Botox discount in my variations. When the item is a short-term promo, so Victoria just mentioned like an Instagram special, I might want to just do a promo for a certain amount off for Instagram, or a certain product combination just for my Instagram followers. That's going to only be for a certain amount of time. That's not a variation. That's a promotional discount that we're offering. BOGOs, if you want to do a buy one, get one free, those are always promotions, which by the way are super simple in the system. And then also event pricing. So if I'm going to do just promotional pricing for an event happening today, and I want to use a POS quick button that has October specials on it, that's going to always be a promotion. So again, one's kind of quick, short-term, very intentional, or a package. One is your everyday, all the time variation. And now how do they compare with each other? And this is where things sort of get interesting in the new features that you're going to see in just a second. They can both be pre-purchased. So people think about, I'm going to pre-purchase a promo. Sure, you probably will for an event. But you may also call in and say, hey, Victoria, I want to pre-purchase my Dysport 1 area. I'm due next week and I'll go ahead and pay for it now. I just got paid and put it on my account. Well, that's not a promotion. She's just calling in to prepay for a 1 area, a $250 cost for Dysport. That's going to be a variation because there's no discount. It's the average, everyday thing that we do versus I'm going to call in for the big discount you're running on the Dysport 1 area. So again, one's discount, one's not. Both have an alias on the receipt. So you'll see on your package or promotion it has a name, just like the variation has a name. So either one will help you to get around that whole product specific thing that we talked about before. You can buy a promo, but you can't chart it. A promotion is like a voucher saying I pre-bought this thing and I have a voucher in my hand that goes into the patient's wallet. It doesn't touch inventory and it's not part of a charting activity. It's just like a promotional coupon in the wallet. You can chart and buy a variation. So I can both pre-buy a variation and I can actually chart it. It's how you chart things in the system so that they always match in the cart. But I could buy a promotion and chart the variation and they could match each other. So big thing, promos, think about it as a coupon voucher. Variation is more of like the charting mechanism of which you could actually do that thing in a patient's chart. And then lastly, you can, like I said, you can build a promotion, and then when the patient comes in to get that procedure done, you could actually apply it via an inventory variation in the chart, so it all matches together. So they work in tandem and in conjunction, but they serve very different purposes, and their mechanism of action is very different. So that may have totally blown your mind, and if it did, I apologize. But when you see it, it's going to make a lot of sense. Victoria, make that easier, because I'm sure it's clear as mud right now.
Yeah. No, I think it's great. And I think too, once we actually get into the system, we'll go through some specific examples and use cases. So I think that that'll really also connect the dots as we move into the system.
Well, I think that
So
we're
ready?
We're at that time.
Ready to dive in?
We are at that time. Yes, go for it.
All right, wonderful.
This is where the fun.
Okay. So let me know when you are able to see my screen.
I'm not sure we can see it quite yet. Give me just a second, see if we can get you going.
Okay.
I don't see it. Victoria, can you try again to hit the share button for us?
Yep.
I think we're getting it coming through right now, hopefully. Okay, now we got you.
We're good? Okay.
I think we're good, yeah.
All right, wonderful. So what we're going to take a look at first is we're actually going to dive into the promotions where we kind of left off, during the PowerPoint. So when we think about any of those series or those one-time offers, anything of that sort, think about promotions. So to get to your promotions, you're clicking that settings wheel, you're going to POS and promotions. The other thing to kind of think about here is, let me see if I zoomed in enough.
Yeah, you look good. You look good.
Because I was gonna say you can still see my Google thing.
Well, you can.
JT, you want to move that off the screen side?
We're refreshing.
Perfect. There we go.
Okay, perfect.
Looking good. Okay, wonderful. So what we'll take a look at here is just, when we think about a microneedling series package, how do we get that into the system? What does it look like? So once again, we're going through promotions first to show you what that actually looks like. Then we're going to circle back to variations so that we can actually truly see the difference of when we would actually use those variations. So to kind of get us started here, we'll take a look at microneedling. So you'll notice here I have microneedling 3 sessions. It's a package. So this is a standard package that I offer all the time. The purpose of this, though, why I would build it as a promotion, because once again, it's a series. So when we think about a series is always going to be a package, under your promotion setting. So you'll notice here that we have that quantity selected, our dollar values listed. And the other thing that, Tiphany had mentioned is just remember that when we do purchase this package, this alias of microneedling 3 sessions, that's what shows on our actual invoice. So kind of just keep that in mind for a differentiator. But we are going to hop back over to variations.
Let the fun begin.
What'd you say?
I said, let the fun begin.
Yes, exactly. So if you are new to Aesthetic Record, or maybe you recently started using the system, or you're looking to start tracking inventory through the system, first step is to make sure that you have your inventory actually set up and configured, first of all. So you'll notice on this page here, everything that I offer in my practice is listed here. So whether it's retail, all my medical supplies need to be added in, as well as all of my services. So make sure that that's step 1, that you get that completed first, because all the fun begins when we actually get over to the variations and we can build it all together. So we're clicking on variations on the left-hand side. So I'll kind of just give you guys an overview of everything that we have in our account, or some of the important things. So Tiffany had mentioned earlier the Genius RF microneedling. So I want to take you guys into that. So a few things here. You will notice that we have a service bucket, a retail bucket, and a medical supplies bucket. So in this particular case with RF microneedling, obviously Genius can be painful at times, so we offer Pronox with that. So you'll notice here that we have Genius listed. We have our price for Genius, so it's $7.99 per session. And then in our medical supplies bucket, we've actually added Pronox. So on the back end, what will happen is our system will be able to track Pronox, but the patient will never actually see Pronox on the invoice. The patient is going to just see Genius RF microneedling on the invoice. The other thing here, so let me go back. So that's going to be one example of a recipe, and we'll take a look at a couple of other recipe examples just to kind of get everybody's wheels turning about how you can actually benefit and use this, in your practice. But if we take a look at an IV example, so we know that everyone is super into health and wellness now in our COVID world. So IVs are definitely, a hit in a lot of med spas that we're working with. And so this is, we have a couple people on it, and it's life-changing because everything that they use during an IV visit, whether it's tubing, gloves, there are a lot of medical supplies on that sector of the business. So we actually can add all of that in here, and it's tracked, and our stock will always be accurate, and the patient never sees, gloves or IV tubing, none of that. So to give you an example, and I'll actually take you through this kind of from start to finish. So if we click this add button over to the right, any of my products or services that I offer show up on this screen here. So I can choose anything, anything my heart desires. You'll notice I'm entering in the units here. So for the Myers cocktail, it's just one. I get to enter in my color and then price per unit. So I only charge $175 per Myers cocktail treatment. Now, when we think about IVs, we have our medical supplies, and I think this is very, very important to kind of, take note of. So on our medical supplies bucket, we can click that add button. Once again, all of my medical supplies that I've actually put into my inventory tab are going to show on this menu. So I've selected IV tubing and a saline bag. So we'll add those in. And you'll notice here that you have a couple of options. So number one, we have selected our saline bag and IV tubing. And we know that for this particular recipe, that we just need one saline bag and one little set of tubing. You can choose to charge per medical supply. I know a lot of practices don't necessarily need a charge next to that, but if you want it, you can put it there. Once you have all of that stuff built, you will notice that up here, your total price is actually auto-calculated for you. So my price per unit was 0 over here. Myers cocktail, $175. So since it's just $175, we have that listed at the very top there. So there's one more example. And then let's talk about, let's pull this little guy out here. Tiffany, feel free to add anything in as I'm going through. I'm just running through some examples for everyone.
I think they're perfect.
Wonderful. All right, so a couple of other examples that we have that I think will be very important for a lot of you. So we've talked about offering services at different rates. So we have our option, for Dysport or Botox, at a specific rate versus with a doctor, with a nurse, etc. So what you'll notice here is we have Dysport with Dr. Kenny. So this is where you can utilize something called at product level. So when we think about those pricing customizations or even variable pricing, depending upon who's performing that procedure, you have the option right here. You would just select at product level, whereas the other stuff that we had looked at, that was all recipe related. So you'll notice down here we have that pricing set up, and then if you do have multiple locations, you can also customize per location. So, maybe one day you're treating in Beverly Hills and you need to charge a little bit more there, you can set that up accordingly. So that's one kind of popular example. And then of course, when we think about employee pricing, this is also a really, really great idea. if you guys have special pricing for injectables, we're using that product level again. So you'll notice here for this particular clinic, the employee Botox is set at $10 per unit. So you can kind of get creative and think about different ways that you would be utilizing product level recipe. But I think another really great example too is microneedling and PRP. So that's kind of my favorite example for variations because I think it paints a very clear picture. But, you know, with microneedling, we have our tip, and PRP, we could be utilizing a PRP kit. So for inventory purposes, we obviously need to track our kit and our tip. So that would be another great example on a recipe inside of an inventory variation here. So as our service bucket, we can list out, you know, microneedling, got that added. And I don't think I have a kit added in my medical supplies, but that would be a really great way to add more medical supplies in. And once again, that's all deducted from inventory upon usage through the app.
Inventory, so, can I jump in real quick?
Yeah,
I'm going to kind of take a two-step back to the inventory variation when you mentioned Dr. Kenny's pricing. So what we tend to see is in the inventory, people put the actual name of that service in their inventory, and they'll attach units of Botox to it. So let's say we have 1,000 units total in our clinic right now. They'll put the same traceability bucket or the same amount of 1,000 units in Kenny's, you know, they'll put Kenny has some, Victoria has some, I have some. So they're taking that bucket of Botox in essence and dividing it out across multiple people. Well, it doesn't really work that way. So if you do that, you may end up with inventory that you pulled out of one, not the other. So you can't track the same bucket of Botox if you use different traceability methods for all these different procedures. So we often see in inventory that people have named things certain service names and they're trying to attach inventory units to it, but they're trying to attach the same bucket of inventory units to multiple things. So that's where the variations on the pricing differences come into play in such a big way, because that will totally change your inventory. If you don't do it that way, the way that the variations work, you're going to have a very tough time figuring out, unless someone has devoted vials just for them. You know, I have my own Botox that I'm holding on to over here. If you don't do it that way, it's impossible to allocate the inventory out to particular people. So I think it's a part of inventory you got to really think about. I think the other part of it is, as you do this, you know, things like cost to company expenses, for the staff treatment example specifically, even if it's a sample. So if your Galderma rep came in, your Evolus rep came in and said, here's, you know, 4 vials of toxin for your staff, there's a good chance you won't use all 4 vials, right? You may have leftover products. So we recommend strongly to put that inventory into your actual inventory system to account for those 4 vials. You can put them at a no cost to company if you want to change your average, but to put them in your inventory because they're real inventory units. And as that staff member gets treated, it's a legitimate chart, right? With inventory units attached to it, they have a full chart. You go to check them out, and you can put in obviously the staff treatment button or the complimentary button, so that shows obviously no cost, but it's still cost to the practice because there's still inventory moving around. You want to still track that. Or if you use actual trade units that you paid for, even more so, because I want to know, again, as I mentioned in the kind of the front of the house on this, it's kind of how you track things through the system. So if I'm giving employees free goods, that's part of their compensation, right? At the end of the year, that's kind of a gift from the practice. I want to track that as well. So I think there's things on here from inventory perspective that if you want your inventory to be accurate, you have to be accurate. You can't kind of pick and choose what you put in there or call things different names and have 15 different Botox options. You got to be very specific about your bucket and about putting everything in and tracking it all, because if it gets left over and you haven't put it in your inventory system, now you have excess units you can't account for, and it's just as bad to be over as it is to be under with inventory, because it means you're missing something in the process. So just wanted to throw that out there, but carry on.
No, I think that's very, very important. And Tiffany and I, we love data. So I think that is something people sometimes miss out on. And that's why we hound everybody about it. You know, things do have to be labeled appropriately. Your cost to company does need to be accurate in your account. So, you know, this is your holy grail. So essentially the data is going to be as good as what you put into it. And I think that's definitely very important. So what I've actually pulled up on my screen is just kind of an example of what traceability looks like. And so if you are new to the system, traceability is going to be how we actually are deducting, you know, Botox units, for example, from your Botox bucket. So You'll notice here when Tiphany was mentioning, if you did get those samples in, mark it as a $0 for a cost to company because that ties into your reporting. So we definitely want it to always pull from the same traceability. So be sure to add that in if you haven't started using it yet. And then I'm going to grab the app here real quick. Feel free to add anything else, Tiphany, if you can think of anything.
I can think of lots of things, but
of course you can.
I think the one thing that we miss out on quite a bit is medical supplies. It's because we think about inventory being a really tight control on things that would walk out of the practice. So things like toxin filler. But your medical supplies are a make or break for the procedure. So for me, the dependency on medical supplies, like an IV, especially if you don't have a bag of saline and you don't have tubing, you can't do the IV. So while it's not maybe as sexy as filler and toxin, it's also the linchpin of a procedure that might be a very high producing procedure for your practice. So I think there's a natural tendency to be like, it's just gloves, it's just cannulas, it's just lifties, whatever it is. But when you go to reach for that thing and it's not there, it's going to make a big dent in the practice. And I think, even thinking about Pronox, if you wanted to use that as a medical supply, because it's just kind of an add-on to the service, if you don't know how much you've been doing on Pronox, you're not sure if you should, get more of it or not, like the actual stuff that you breathe in, the gas. So I think there's a big tracking part of it that we might overlook because people don't think about medical supplies as being this really important part of the practice as often as they do the actual revenue-producing products.
Wonderful. All right, so let me know when you can see my iPad screen.
Okay, give me just a second.
Per usual, I'm working off a lot of screens, so give me 1 second here. I think I've got to stop presenting here.
Yep, we just got to switch your share and we should be good.
We're almost there.
For those of you who are watching that you're like your iPad, we have the control center, what we just showed you, where we do all the reporting, we do all the building of the system, and then the iPads where the provider actually goes in the room, treats the patient, traces things through and traceability, checks people out. So one's kind of an extension. They're tethered together in a virtual world, but one's an extension of the control center, where the control center is really the admin portal for you to do all the back end work. I think we can see you, so you're good to go.
Okay, wonderful. Alrighty. So what we're going to do now, we've taken you through the process of how to actually build these variations. So now it's time to actually use them. So what we're going to do here is we are going to go into one of our little patient profiles. And I'm just going to click into a procedure that I've already pre-created before. So let me get rid of that. And I'm going to show you how we would actually chart that particular variation here in just a moment. Maybe.
We're going to maybe get you full screen here in just a second with your iPad so we can see things.
Okay, perfect. All right. Let me know once we're full screen.
Yep, we're good to go.
Okay, wonderful. So let's see here. So we are going to go ahead and use the example of Dysport with Dr. Kenny to kind of start off with. So you'll notice from this section here, I can go ahead and select that variation. And then all I need to do at this point is just mark out, my different areas that I'm treating. And then what would happen is it would multiply the amount that I've charted with that. I believe we had his Dysport set at $7 a unit. So once we log all of that in the photo, I am going to go ahead and save this for everybody so we can actually see what it looks like from an invoicing perspective. So once we get back there, you will notice that the invoice is going to say, Dysport with Dr. Kenny, just as we had created. And then we will be able to invoice accordingly, and then it will, pre-calculate everything for us. So I'm using our beta app right now, so moving a little bit for me. It's ready for the weekend.
I am as well, Victoria, ready for the weekend.
Yeah, do you have any fun plans?
Well, it's freezing cold in Dallas today, so hopefully I will be at home with hot chocolate watching like the Hallmark Channel in a perfect world. But
I love Hallmark movies. Too funny. If you guys ever wonder what I'm doing when I'm not working, it's watching Hallmark. All right, so we have the checkout screen pulled up. Now, obviously, I told you guys this was our beta account, our demo account, so you probably wouldn't have tax on this, but you can ignore that for right this moment. So here you'll notice that, you know what, it doesn't want my thing that I logged to stick. So
This is the challenge of using a demo account or a beta account that you're testing in right here.
exactly.
You're seeing it in real time.
Right. I wonder if I use, well, so anyway, I'll just kind of move on just because you guys get the gist of it. So the invoicing aspect would say Disport with Dr. Kenny rather than just Disport. So that would be the biggest change that you guys would see from an invoicing perspective. Now I want to take you through another example here of, let me remove all this, of using a different variation. So let's say that we're doing, microneedling and PRP. So I can go ahead, select microneedling, and you know what, hey JT, can you swap our screens real quick? I'm gonna try to update this app one more time and see if that helps us move a little bit. We'll see if they push another update out for us.
So you can come back with me. We'll get that updated.
Yeah.
And I may have, if I knew a patient, I would go through and look at an actual invoice of one of yours, Victoria, if you had one handy that you can think of. So I can get my AR screen pulled up.
This is actually almost done.
Oh, perfect.
Moving quick for us. So I'm trying to think of somebody that I've taken. Angeline, maybe?
Okay. Well, hopefully you'll get your update fast.
Yeah, I just got it back in, so we're good.
Oh, good, perfect. Then we'll throw it back to you.
All right.
We're back on the uptick here.
Alrighty, there we go. This looks a little bit better. We don't have all of our jumbled names. Okay, so let's go ahead and we'll go to this profile here. And let me create a brand new procedure real fast. And so also too, if anybody is new to the system, the process I just went through really from start to finish is the process that you would kind of go through upon logging a new procedure. So you get to actually sign all of those consents electronically, or your patient does. The health history form is electronic. Really the whole process is electronic. So it's really nice, obviously with COVID, that you're not shuffling paper back and forth. And then two, just from an efficiency standpoint, you have it all in one place.
And if you're not using a patient portal, you better start using it. I've had a few customers in the past week that are moving over to our EMR from other companies, but they don't have a patient portal. The patient portal, it will save your life. It's hands-free. Like, you don't have to do anything when they come in the front door. They can do all the paperwork at their desk at work, at home, whatever time, at their convenience. It makes life a lot easier. So make sure if you're not using the consents and questionnaires attached to your procedures in our system, that you attach them and start really leveraging your patient portal, because it is a game changer for you.
A lifesaver. You got that right. Okay, so let's go ahead and just use the Myers cocktail. So obviously I probably wouldn't typically be logging this on a facial photo, but to kind of give you an example, you'll see the different buckets on the top left corner of the screen. So if I click on service bucket, it automatically takes me to Myers cocktail, and it tells me I have basically one session to use. So we'll pretend this is, somebody's arm here. So I'm going to enter that in. Now I just hit my back button in the top left, click medical supplies. You'll notice here that this says, it contains medical supplies, but I don't really need to do anything with it. So once we're all good here, I'm actually just going to go ahead and save it. And then we're going to make our way to the actual checkout screen here in just a moment. And
the big test. Did our update work? Here we go.
Let's see if it's connected. Oh, wonderful. There we go. So this is how it's supposed to look. So it's just a friendly reminder to update your app if you're using aesthetic records regularly. But anyway, you'll notice here we have that Myers cocktail IV. So if you remember, we had 2 medical supplies listed. in this, but you'll notice it's not showing up on the invoice. So that's obviously what we're trying to achieve with this. So I can go ahead and hit my checkout button, takes me to the checkout screen, and then I can, finalize that process accordingly. So that's going to be one example of what that really looks like on the invoice. Now, if we go back here, let's log, we'll do the Genius. So we have the Genius. So it's a similar format. We have our service bucket. So I just tap on Genius. I'm going to double tap on my picture, hit my back button in the top left, go to medical supplies just to verify Pronox is there. Everything looks great. So we can hit continue. So we'll save it, and then we're going to make our way back to our checkout screen, and we should have Genius RF microneedling listed on our invoice once we get to that final screen.
I think we're going to make it a little bit bigger so we can see it even better.
Okay. All right. Okay, so the next thing that I wanted to point out that's new, with this new launch of variations, we now have the ability to actually just take the payment directly from the app. So let's say that maybe you forgot to chart it for whatever reason and you still needed to add it into the cart. If you click on promotions at the top right and you click inventory variations, all of your variations that you've pre-created are listed here accordingly. Now you'll notice a couple of different things on this checkout screen. So the dash, that refers to, or the dash on the right side, that just refers to at product level. So that means that you set a specific price. So if we go back to our example of Dysport with Dr. Kenny, it's $7 per unit. So that's kind of what that means. Now, the 3 items listed below, the Myers cocktail, the Genius, and Hydrofacial, those are recipes. So we've preset the pricing, and that could contain really anything from retail to medical supplies to services. So
And
kind of keep that in mind.
Can I jump in real quick?
Yeah,
I just had a light, you know how you get a light bulb moment in your mind?
Yeah.
When you just said that, it made me think of something that was a big differentiator. When you have a price level variant, you can chart as many units as your heart desires. So for instance, with Dr. Kenny's Botox, Dr. Kenny's Dysport, he could chart 1 unit or 1,000 units. It is a price per unit level that he can just go until he's blue in the face. On the recipe, you preset the quantity. So it is a pre-made, pre-done set amount. So if you want to go indefinitely, you can't do that with the recipe. However, you could do something like this. Let's say it's Dr. Kenny's Dysport. We might have a Dr. Kenny Glabella at $250 that we chart. And then we want to be able to add on additional units for Dr. Kenny because we decided that this person is like me and has a crazy frown and needs like way more units. I can then add on just price level changes indefinitely, but your recipe is always a fixed amount. So that's why those little dashes are helpful, because it's like, wait a minute, these are fixed quantities versus I can just go forever because the price is just different on this particular thing. So that might be one way to help you think about it, because if you go to chart a recipe and you run out of product quantity, you're like, wait a minute, I still need to do more, and the recipe's already been used, the cake's already been baked, you got to go find some more ingredients. So just think about that as you're charting the difference.
Definitely. So you'll notice here too, from that invoicing perspective, we have our Myers cocktail and our Genius RF microneedling. So that's going to be what that checkout process looks like. Now, I did want to point out as well, if we make our way back to just the main patient screen. So on the bottom right side, if you click your blue icon, you'll have a little credit card. This is called your quick pay option. So for whatever reason, if you needed to send this to the wallet for later use, you can use that little quick pay button. So just to kind of give everybody a quick idea of what that looks like. Let's go back to variations.
And quick pay is great. Like if you're in the middle of an event, people are pre-purchasing things, you don't have to go into their chart and that kind of hullabaloo, if you will. You can do quick pay to get it done quickly, and it's attached to the patient's name. Just make sure, quick pro tip, that when you do that, don't check them out as a guest. Take the extra 1 minute and find their patient name so that you send it to the right wallet, and it goes to the wallet, frankly, and that you don't get them confused with other patients. So make sure you do that.
Yeah, very important. So the nice thing about this, once you actually finalize that payment, it is going to auto insert, Myers cocktail IV into the patient wallet, so that at a later time, if the patient came in and was ready to actually redeem it and use it, they would be able to easily do so. All right, Tiffany, anything else you can think of from the app?
I think the only other thing that we could mention, and not to confuse or muddy the waters, but if someone bought on a promotion, they bought I don't know if we have a promotion in our system, but let's say it was a BOGO of some sort for a toxin, or maybe that's not a great example, a recipe of some sort. They bought the Genius microneedling on a promotion. So for today only, it is a 20% discount that's already baked into the price on a promo. If they came in with that already in their wallet, you can still go chart the exact same way we just showed you, that Victoria just showed you with the microneedling, the RF Genius, where she had the Pronox already in it, everything already in it. You could still chart the variant because it's, again, all inclusive, and then redeem the actual promotion against that variant. So if you think about the variation as how you're charting it, you can put a promotion for whatever you want. And if the variation matches it, great. You can still chart it as the variation, because what happens for a lot of providers is if you have a lot of different variations, it gets very confusing, right? Which thing goes with which thing? Is this a Juvederm, or is this a Restylane? Is this a toxin? What's going on here? The variants help you to lock that in place so that the provider who has a lot to remember, when they go to really chart that recipe, it's already pre-made for them. They can only choose from a Sculptra and whatever else. They can't choose a Voluma. So you kind of lock them into a lane. That way, if they're doing a promotion that has a variant that coordinates, it's just easier to chart when they don't have to think about what they're doing. Just because they're always in a hurry. As we know, they're in a hurry. They're doing a lot of things with patients, and they're on the hustle, go, go, go. So just remember that you can buy a promo, but chart against an actual variation if they match up. So that would be helpful in the app. I'm not sure if we have time to show it, but just something to be thinking about.
Yeah, definitely. And one thing to kind of keep in mind, so we are, obviously today's webinar is to prepare everyone for this launch. So we are launching this towards the tail end of next week. It could even be before, but we're very, very excited about it. And, if anyone has questions about things that you're kind of, thinking about, is this a variation? Is it a promotion? What should I do with it? We're always happy to help. So you can always chat us or email us directly at info@aesthetic-record, and we'd be more than happy to, take a look at things and help you.
Well, I think a great point, Victoria. In the next couple of days, as we wait for this to go live in our system, be thinking about within your inventory what things already match this idea or this format, and get prepared to go ahead and move them over to variation, so that as you go into your event season, you go into Q4, when inventory flies off the shelf, because we're just all so busy with all the promotions and things happening, you're really set up for success. I think there's obviously we wish it was live right this second, but we want it to be perfect for you. But certainly in the next few days, be thinking about it, so that way if you want to ask us questions, we're happy to get those answered, and even help you to kind of think through how to program them in the system and what to do with them. We didn't mention any of the reporting today, so as we put this on our YouTube channel at a later time with the actual micro trainings that we do, or micro learnings that we provide, we'll show you how this pulls through on the reporting side, so you can see your category, like type reports that you always have, your retail reports, your product reports. You'll kind of see how that all works versus how you might look at a promotions or packages report that you're selling. So we'll make sure that we include that in some of the future learnings as well as this thing goes live, and we have some actual transaction data going into the system. So look for those reports coming. This is obviously going to be available live on YouTube too. You can watch it. If you have questions or thoughts later on, if they come to you in the middle of the night, you can certainly watch this. But your little chat bubble on the blue part of your screen there on your AR app or your AR dashboard on the right-hand side, click on that, and we'll be there for you almost all day, every day, to get your questions answered live. So, anything else,
Wonderful.
Victoria?
No, thanks for joining, everyone, and we're very excited for inventory variations too, and we will see you guys all next week.
Bye, guys.
Bye. We'll see ya.